on the ball.
You got to come up with something different.
I love that joke.
Well, I loved it too the first 20 times, but
yeah, well, I haven't done it for like 2 years, so.
No, that's not true. You did it like 3 weeks ago.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Who's counting?
Yeah.
Apparently Mike.
Well, if you're watching live, please let us know that you can see us and hear us as usual. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. And our guest, Bill's got a t-shirt. Rick's got a t-shirt, a Lovecraft eZine podcast t-shirt. Bridget's got her t-shirt on. Rick does. I do. Matt, did you not receive your t-shirt?
Did you send me one? Are you just doing this thing where you tell me to check the mail every day like you've done many times?
It is fun. It is fun to do that, though.
And then I go running down to the mailbox and there's nothing there.
Yeah, keep checking. You might want to check 3 or 4 times a day. So, yeah, no, I did send you one, and I did send Pete one. Apparently, they just have not arrived yet. Either that, or you guys got them, and you're like, hell no, I'm not wearing this.
So, I don't know if you know this, but one of my kids has claimed most of my Cthulhu shirts, including all the Lovecraft eZine shirts.
Oh, smart kid.
Yeah.
Smart kid. Yeah. That just means you have to get more.
Yes, sure.
You have to put up with all our, you've seen these shows, you put up with all of our bullshit before we actually talk to you about your book, Allie. So how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I know you just said before we went live that you had your time changed there in the UK, so it's 11 o'clock at night for you.
It is, and I'm not wearing a Lovecraft t-shirt, but I do have quite a cool sort of universal
that's awesome.
situation.
That ties in with our prize. It ties in with our prize.
Oh, it's really
very nice.
It's really cozy, but also incredibly static.
Oh, that's funny. I like that. It's shocking.
Well, it's because of the bolts.
So for those watching, listening, you can get a t-shirt too. LovecraftEZineSwag.com. I've got some new URLs. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, that's what it looks like. We've actually got 3 versions. I've got the same one Bill has. Bridget has the purple background. And then there's one without the crazy person. And then my artist, Steve Santiago, just sent me, I got to upload it to TeePublic, a female crazy person too, for those who want that later. And you guys know how much I love old time radio. So he's working on one. We're going to say something like just Lovecraft eZine podcast, but it's going to have like an old time radio vibe, maybe an old time radio. You know, he's the artist. I basically gave him that, and I don't micromanage. So he's working on it. But yeah, I'd love to wear a t-shirt like that too.
We have a 3-hour meeting to plan a 2-hour podcast. What do you mean you don't micromanage?
We do. I wasn't invited.
Oh, never mind.
All right. Shall we do introductions? Why don't you start, Matt, since you got the prize that you're going to send to my house?
Yeah, this is really cool. It's a hardcover copy of a book that just came out by Kickstarter, and it is Classic Monsters Unleashed. It will include The Creature of the Black Lagoon, Bride of Frankenstein, who knows, all new fiction. It could be yours if you send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put classic in the subject heading. We draw a winner in about 5 or 6 weeks. Maybe it'll be you.
Very
that
cool
goes
prize.
great with Allie's shirt. Yeah. Bridget.
Hello, Bridget, a creator of music and art things, and final girl.
All right. Rick.
Rick Lay, writer and Pulp magazine collector.
And
a new haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Bill, you want to introduce yourself?
Bill Richardson, writer and filmmaker. Hellfighters is my latest.
And let's see, last but not least, Pete.
Pete Rawlik, writer, agent provocateur, editor, critic, culinary expert.
Awesome. So audience, you're saying there's no echo. I've got a new microphone. That's why I'm asking. So,
And please, Pete, just because you like to eat a lot, it doesn't make you a culinary expert. If you're taking a spoon and you're eating mayonnaise out of a jar, I would just beg to differ.
I would suggest,
I
that
don't
is
know what that
actually
means.
the exact definition of a culinary expert. But, it's somebody who just has an actual thesaurus next to them.
So Ali,
dinosaur?
what?
A thesaurus, is that a dinosaur?
Yes.
Ali, can you tell us about yourself? Ali Wilkes. Ali Wilkes is the author of a new book, All the White Spaces. Tell us about you first, and then tell us about the book with it spoiler free. So,
Okay. So about me, I'm Ali Wilkes. I'm a horror author. I live in Greenwich, which is in South London. I've been a massive, massive horror and particularly cosmic horror fan all my life. And All the White Spaces is my first novel. So I'm really excited for that. It's going to be out in the US on Tuesday, which isn't that far away.
yeah, great timing.
Yeah, I know, right? So
We're
to tell you a
recording this on
little
the.
bit about.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Oh, thank
I
you.
was just going to say we're recording this on the 27th of March. So that's your book is 2 days away in the United States. It's already out in the UK, right?
Yeah,
and a lot of
it came out
people
to me.
listen to this later. So if you might be listening and it's already out. So anyway, tell us about your book.
Sure. It's a historical horror novel set on a post-First World War expedition to Antarctica. The protagonist, Jonathan Morgan, is a trans man. His family has been very much affected by the horrors of the First World War, and he essentially runs away to Antarctica, partly to prove himself, partly to get away from his past. But the expedition meets with a number of disasters, some of which are supernatural in nature. And of course, they all end up on the ice with something deadly and mysterious picking them off one by one.
In the reviews, I've seen comparisons to The Thing. I've seen comparisons to Dan Simmons' The Terror, which those are great books. So it's great to be compared, or the great movie, great book. So it's probably nice to be compared to those. What do you think?
I think it's great. When I first started writing it, which was about 6 years ago now, I was a little bit precious about comparisons to The Terror, because The Terror is so steeped in history and exquisite detail, and my book is slightly shorter and slightly, I would say, a bit more fantastical. But yeah, amazing comparisons in terms of like atmosphere, paranoia, real polar classics. So great books. Well, a great book and a great movie, and also great source material in the novella.
Well, Laird Barron said more than once that authors who don't like being compared to, other good authors or good movies or good books, I'm paraphrasing him, but he doesn't understand, because if you want to compare me to this great writer, go right ahead. I'll take it. So it's a supernatural book. And now I want to ask you, there's a lot, you talk about details. How did you capture this? This is post World War I, if I remember right. How did you capture all the details of the era and of the expedition and the ship and so forth?
Well, I would say there were like 3 main strands of research I had to do. The first being the war itself, World War I. So I had to read a lot about the First World War, in particular accounts by people who were at the front or at the casualty clearing stations, as well as the people left behind. So things like letters and diaries were a really useful resource for that. The second strand was obviously polar exploration, which has been a sort of lifelong passion for me, the history of polar exploration. I just find it fascinating. So it was a great excuse to just reread everything I could get my hands on about Scott and Shackleton and all those expeditions and so on and so forth. And then the third strand was really a sort of more hands-on strand. I did stuff like go to visit the Discovery, that was Scott and Shackleton's exploration ship. It went to Antarctica with them. It's now in dry dock in Dundee up in Scotland. So you can go and you can climb over it. You can see what it looks like inside and out. And that was incredibly helpful in getting sort of all the details and the sort of spatial awareness for it. And then I just did anything I could think of that I felt would bring it alive. So I learned to climb ropes. I learned aerial circus skills.
Wow.
I went on a vintage sailing ship in the Baltic Sea in October in full period costume, bloody cold. You know, I did things like that to try and
amazing.
give it
Wow.
of authenticity that obviously I couldn't get from it's a particular time and place that's now gone. So I had to find ways to recreate that in small ways.
Well, I want to ask you more about the book, but I did not know any of what you just told me. Can you maybe elaborate more about the Baltic Sea thing and a couple of the other things you said? I mean, that just, you know, I know a lot of writers, and I know a lot of writers that go to extreme levels of research and so forth, but this is a little beyond anything that I've personally heard. So it's really cool. So tell us about the Baltic Sea thing.
That was actually, I went there as part of a LARP. That's a live action role-playing game. Specifically a style of LARP called Nordic LARP, which is much more focused on storytelling and characterization than perhaps your classic sort of stereotype of LARP, which is, you know, the wobbly rubber swords and people rolling dice in combat and so on. But the LARP I went on, it was called the Demeter, and it was based on the last voyage of the Demeter from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right.
So they populated the ship with 26 or so interesting characters and sailed us all around the Baltic Sea on this vintage sailing ship in our costumes while we sort of plotted and machinated, and some people were murderers, some people were vampires. I was a madhouse asylum doctor transporting two of my most dangerous patients back to England. And so we had, you know, a week of being very intensely living on this tiny vintage boat called the Pipolotta, getting monstrously seasick and doing these intense role play things from, I think it was from 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. was in game, 4 hours out of game to sleep. And they genuinely meant that. Like at one point it was about 1 a.m. and things started seeming like they were winding down for the night. So I was in the one bathroom on the ship, brushing my teeth, thinking, okay, you've got this early night. Yeah. And then the door was open and it was my cannibal patient that I was transporting, covered in fake blood, going, doctor, doctor, I think I've done something terrible.
Could be, yes.
No early nights tonight.
That is amazing. Wow. Kim on the live chat said, oh man, what have I been doing with my life?
It's so much fun. The company that did Demeter also had one which was more specific to my interests called Erebus, in which they literally do take the ship, park it up somewhere in the Baltic Sea, and then it's the Erebus, one of John Franklin's doomed ships for a week. Yeah. And frankly, that might interest me more because one of the things I learned as soon as I was on this sailing ship is I am no sailor. I'm useless with the ropes. I'm useless with all the sort of shipboard tasks, and I'm monstrously seasick. So a lot of the time, a lot of the time people would be coming up to me and sort of trying to get me interested in their plans or their schemes, or, you know, sort of conduct, you know, neurological examinations or put people in under deep hypnosis to reveal their character secrets or whatever. And I would be on the deck, like staring at the horizon going, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I'm not gonna vom.
You know, I'm amazed with all the reality TV, you know, for years now, I guess. I was going to say these days, but for years now, that they don't, LARPs like this, that they don't film them, you know, because that would be pretty entertaining to watch.
It was very interesting. We actually had a photographer and videographer embedded in amongst the player characters. So that LARP is particularly well documented. So lots of really beautiful photography and also lots of video footage shot on it. And it just looks gorgeous.
Guys, feel free to jump in if you have questions too, please. Just while we're on this, tell me a little bit more about the other characters on the boat.
So the way it was done is, as I understand it, the way a lot of these very big immersive LARPs are cast, which is that you write in with, there's a preset menu of characters, the character archetypes, and you can select, for example, do you want to play a sailor? Do you want to play an upper class character or a lower class character? And then it sort of starts whittling down to nitty gritty and you get your character sheet or whatever. But there was, so I was transporting two of my most dangerous patients. There was a butterfly collector from the Amazon who'd gone rogue and murdered the rest and eaten the rest of her expedition. Very fun, very fun. My other patient was a sort of Renfield type character, and she was played incredibly well. The people who ran the game had got in touch with her beforehand and gone, hey, do you want to eat some bugs? And she'd gone, yes, I want to eat some bugs. And so they gave her a box of edible insects that she could place around the ship so that halfway through conversations with people, she could just pluck them out of the air and munch on them. It was just such a great effect. It was really, really effective.
My default answer to that is always, no, I do not want to eat bugs, but thank you for asking.
Yeah,
Matt, you have a question.
Yeah. So you said you're a writer. Well, that is a very brief introduction. How long have you been a writer? Is this something you've been doing your whole life? Did you go to university, get a degree in English, or is that related to your work, or how did this work out?
Wow. Well, a really circuitous route in that when I was younger, like all through school, I was obsessed with writing horror and designing little graphic novels and things like that, and spooky stories, and writing what might have been early creepypasta and sort of passing it around the other kids at my boarding school and, you know, fucking them up a little bit maybe. Very sorry to all the people I did that to. I'm sorry I made you so afraid. But then I sort of swerved sideways. I did law at university and I became a criminal barrister for 11 years working in London and the Southeast.
Really?
So wait.
Yeah,
a
very,
barrister,
very different.
Sorry, a barrister for criminals or a criminal barrister?
What's the difference, eh? A barrister for criminals.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm glad you didn't make the other one, which I always get, which is so Starbucks.
So does that translate to in the United States a defense attorney? Is that the same?
Over here, you tend to do both. Most barristers tend to prosecute and defend. So
Really?
It translates roughly to a trial attorney that can be hired by either side, essentially.
So did you decide that wasn't for you?
Yeah.
So what have you been doing in the meantime? Like, if this is going to be your first novel, have you been active like in magazines or short stories or essays or something?
Again, very shamefully, probably not as much as you'd hope.
She doesn't have time. She's doing all this research for this novel, going on the ship and everything.
Well, I left the bar about 6 years ago, and since then I've really been sort of working on this novel, trying to get a book deal, the normal things, trying to get an agent, trying to get a book deal. I've published a little bit in magazines. I've been in Three Crows and Nightmare magazine. Over here, we also have a British horror magazine called Horrified, and I'm the book reviews editor for that. So I've been sort of doing that sort of thing, which has just largely meant I've read a lot of books and talked a lot of shit about them.
So you're from London? Or is it where everybody in England ends up?
It's certainly where I ended up. I worked out the other day, I've been here since 2004. So yeah, I'm more from London than I am from anywhere, I guess.
Then what was your influence? What is it that influenced you? Like, was it are you like a fan person for movies, for their authors that you really liked? What got you down this path where all of us ended up?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, it is a really good question. I think, again, for me, I sort of took a sideways swerve midway through my life, in that when I was younger, scary stuff was what I lived and breathed, all the sort of like ghost books for kids, that sort of thing, X-Files, Book of the Unexplained, bring it on. I was reading a lot of like Ramsey Campbell, who was definitely dominating the British horror scene over here when I was growing up. And then we don't seem to have as many widely available horror books over here as you guys do in the States. Our horror section of a bookstore, if there even is one, is like 2 shelves of King and Kuntz and Lovecraft editions, and I'm not knocking any of those, but you don't really get the most recent releases. So I went through a large stage of really horror movies was my thing. So I went to like a lot of horror film festivals.
Tell us some of your favorites. Tell us some of your favorite movies.
What did I rewatch the other day? I did a double bill of The Descent and Dog Soldiers, Neil Marshall's early finest. I think
Dog Soldiers,
those are just
movie.
Perfect films, aren't they? They're just great.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, he did recently this weird little 2-nighter Halloween pop-up bar in London a couple of years ago, where he directed an immersive horror experience with crack and rum, and it was just wild. It was wild. You were like taken as an audience through this sort of subterranean bar while people with these Kraken masks, like the sea zombies, were coming to get you. And in each room you had to down a cocktail to keep the levels of anti-Kraken up in your bloodstream. It was just, it was as nuts as I'm making it sound. But as a Neil Marshall fan, I was just like, hey guys, we've all got to go to his new bar. It's great.
So that was a true pub crawl.
Well, it was all in one building in, I think it was in Whitechapel, like all over different floors of one building. And I just distinctly remember that at one stage, my friend and I, we were really into it, because if there's one thing I love, it's immersive horror theatre. I spent some time like as a zombie scare actor, so I get into this stuff. And at one stage, my friend and I were like commando rolling out of the room to get out the zombies. And one of the zombies had to break character and go, you guys, the door's over there. Stop it. Stop it.
Real quick, Ali, occasionally I hear like maybe you're tapping your mic a little bit or something. And then you move your hand away and I don't hear it anymore. Maybe it's just me. At what point did you think, okay, I'm a barrister, I want to quit and I want to write books? What was the tipping point for that?
Weirdly enough, and it comes from what we've just discussed, it was a summer I spent as a part-time zombie scare actor at an immersive horror event in Whitechapel, London. It was an event called the Generation of Z. It was essentially a 28 days later type scenario in the basement of this old department store in Whitechapel. The audience was herded into this place to be taken to safety. But then, of course, there was an infected in the crowd. And then the soldiers came firing blanks, smoke bombs. It was this sort of dirty, smelly underground thing. And for weeks, I would report there on a Friday night, get zombie made up, drench myself in fake blood, and spend the Friday night and the weekend running around this underground maze, you know, making the zombie screech and hammering at walls. And it was such a really incongruous thing to be doing, and then going straight back into trial on Monday morning, like with my voice all ripped up from, you know, the yeah, it's just it really fucks up your vocal cords doing that too much. So and I was just like doing that in my free time and being a barrister the rest of the time. And I was like, do you know what I actually love more than anything in the world is horror, and being scared and scaring people and creating these narratives and these experiences. And that was the first moment when I was like, do you know what, that is what I would find more rewarding than this.
Yeah, well, I think it, I know it takes tremendous courage to make a decision like, okay, I went to university, to college for this, I'm doing this, I'm well paid, you know, and then realize that you want to do something else. And it takes a lot of courage to make a midlife career change like that, I think. Something that my wife did. She was a criminal prosecutor for a long time. And
wow.
Yeah, and I remember her coming to me a while, but you know, years ago, and saying that she just wasn't feeling it anymore. And I said, well, you know, we can always get more money, but what we can't get more of is time. You know, and you want to live your life and not look back and wish you had spent time on the things that you actually loved. You know, so you know, I'm just saying I applaud you, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. So my son, who is my tech guy, says on the live chat, I have to look up all the stuff you have done. Have you ever written about that stuff, or maybe on a blog or something? So what about that?
I don't have a blog.
Should put all that out there somewhere so people can read about it sometime, you know?
Yeah, maybe. I don't have a blog. I confess I did have a very short-lived blog for about a year, and then when I realized that over the last year it had got like 13 hits and I was paying for the hosting, I was like, I see the world does not have enough.
Before we get off the immersive experience, the last time I was in London, Allie, I did the Jules Verne War of the Worlds. Have you done that?
I haven't, no. Where was that?
I couldn't tell you, but it was a live immersive experience. It starts out in a bar, and then you go down in the bottom of it, and it was really tremendous. I don't know if it's still going on. That was before the pandemic, so it was really, really well done.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky. We've got a lot of like immersive stuff going on. There's quite a sort of healthy theatre in the round sort of scene, and also a healthy horror theatre scene as well. Although I've just seen today that London Horror Society won't be putting on its usual theatre season because of various things related to COVID, which is a shame.
Yeah. You know, when I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead. You have another question.
Oh, I've got some other questions, but I just want to ask her that while we were on that topic.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say, Allie, if I remember correctly, the first time I contacted you about your book, because I saw that it was coming up, I think I saw it on Twitter or some, you know, social media somewhere. And, you know, first thing I thought of was, you know, Mountains of Madness type thing, or adjacent or something like that. And you said it's not, but I love that sort of thing too. So So you're a Lovecraft fan or a cosmic horror fan? So
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've read Mountains of Madness, it's all over my book, because there's no real other way to engage with the idea of there being a creepy place in Antarctica that has mountains that bad things come out of. I think the sort of mood and the atmosphere, I couldn't escape that influence, and there are points in which I sort of really lent into it, and also points in which I had to sort of check myself and dial back, because the antagonists in my book are more supernatural than actually, obviously, the physical entities from At the Mountains of Madness. But I think that sort of utter sort of cosmic bleakness, that horror of the void, the empty spaces, the ancient time of this place, very much that's something I was influenced by when I was writing the novel.
there's a short story on my site, Lovecraft eZine.com. You can just search for it in the search bar. It's called the Crevasse. I'm not sure if I'm saying that the right way. It was written by Dale Bailey and Nathan Ballingrud. And it's just a short story, but it's, those guys are great. It is actually one of my favorite cosmic horror short stories. And it just sounds like, I mentioned it because it sounds like something that you would really get a kick out of reading. So, and for those in the audience that don't know, that are maybe newer, Lovecraft eZine magazine's still there at the website. There's hundreds of stories that you can read for free. I'm into publishing books more now as far as that stuff goes, but those stories are still there for you. So, you can go down that rabbit hole for quite a long time. So, anyway, Bill, I'm sorry. Did you have another question?
Only, Allie, you sort of, in the book, you sort of skirt how much you reveal, how much you don't reveal, what's really going on, what's not going on. Tell us a little bit about that, because, a lot of horror these days is very in your face, and it's a very, very difficult talent to just keep the audience interested, but not reveal so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something I really struggled with as I was writing the book, and also I think at certain points made it quite hard to pitch to agents or to publishers, because it's been described as quite a slow burn horror, and I don't shy away from that description. Part of the feature of the book is that the things that they encounter, the supernatural menace they encounter, the expedition won't encounter until they get to Antarctica. And of course, they've got to get there first. So there has to be necessarily a period of build up before things start spilling over. And I did find it difficult to sort of add hints throughout the earlier part of the book that, hold on, it's coming, I'm not gonna run away from this, it's not gonna be a Scooby-Doo, I'm not gonna suddenly turn around at the end and go, it was, someone in a big hat all along, or so I'm trying to keep the audience's trust that I will eventually get down to some supernatural nitty-gritty, but also whilst indulging, I think, my own preference, which is that you see as little of the supernatural as possible. And it's done largely by suggestion and without any easy answers. Because I do find, I don't know, for me, what's scariest is when the characters have no idea what rules they're playing under. When they can't instantly box the thing in and go, oh, it's a ghost that wants this, or
because immediately it's less scary once it's known.
Yeah.
Fear, like Lovecraft said, fear of the unknown. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you have the sort of rules of engagement. And not only do you have the characters might bring their own rules of engagement to the table, but the audience certainly will. And the audience will be thinking, oh, I know how to deal with that. Why don't they just do? And it creates, in my mind, a barrier between the audience and the characters, because they second guess the characters because they think they know better. Whereas I think for me, some of these scariest novels are ones in which the audience and the characters are discovering things as they go along together, and sort of you can create a lot more empathy that way.
I absolutely agree. Nice compliment for you. Kim on the live broadcast says that you're Laird Baron level. So with the kind of what you're talking about. So that's a nice compliment. So.
That is an incredible compliment. I will take that. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So tell us more about your protagonist. He's trans. Do we refer to him as he?
Yes.
You know, and so on and so forth. And tell us about him and you know, why he decides to go on this expedition.
So Jonathan is someone who has been very much shut out of a world that he wanted to join. You know, he's been assigned female at birth. He's been treated by his family and all the people around him in a gender role that he feels he doesn't fit. And he's seen in particular his two older brothers and their best friend all go off to war and have all these sort of stirring sort of masculine experiences that sort of, if you read the sort of war stuff around at the time, the register is very sort of almost very boy's own. It's very sort of heroic. It's quite japes. It's, you know, it makes it sound a lot better than the horrible grim reality of the war. So he feels that he has been denied that opportunity to prove himself. And the novel starts with him learning that his two brothers have been killed in action at the front. And he has to make sense of what it is he does with his life now, without them as his influences and quasi-protectors. And so it's the sort of decision you make whilst in the, I think, in the depths of great grief, a logical leap that's actually quite hard to understand, which is, well, they always were going to go to Antarctica after this. I will do that. And then maybe I'll be clawing back a little bit of what they were. I'll be finding a little bit of them by doing so. And that's what ultimately propels him onto the boat and off to Antarctica, because he's grown up again with those sort of stories of, you know, the heroic expeditions and the glory and the sacrifice and the frostbite and the I may be some time, etc. And so it's another masculine world where he's got a chance to prove himself and have the sort of the life that he felt he always deserved to have.
I don't want to pretend that I know how that would feel at all, because obviously I don't, but I just want to, you know, point out that obviously it's hard enough today for trans people, and this is 100 years ago, pretty much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time reading historical, as much as I could get my hands on, about trans people through the ages, at the turn of the century, and also just more broadly LGBTQ lives at the turn of the century, to get an idea of what it was like to be different from heteronormative society. And it's strange in a way, because what you can get from some of those narratives is how difficult it was for them, because a lot of them obviously didn't have the parameters or the language or the framework that we would now use to express our identities. Yeah. But on the other hand, you find stories great, maybe not acceptance, but great tolerance, people being surprisingly, well, I'll just let you get on with it. And that was, for me, some of the biggest surprises when I dug into that, how sometimes the people you would least expect around those times were, I'll just let you get on with it. So it's sort of an interesting duality, both more accepting and less accepting, certainly not as polarized an issue as it is now.
Pete, counterpoint? Point?
No, actually, I think she makes a good point. I mean, the literature of the time is just full of these stories of girls pretending to be men. and going out on adventures. But we just never refer to them in the language that we have today.
Yeah.
And you can trace this all the way back to Milan, you know, and if not further. And then she's right, and you're right, because from the research I've looked at is like the 1920s, 1930s, everything sort of becomes acceptable.
Mhm.
It's a golden age of experimentation. And, you know, there was a huge amount of literature concerning the subject, but then most of it is destroyed in the purges of World War II.
Yeah.
So we lose, you know, this golden age of sexuality because the war happens and intolerance just spreads throughout Europe. So yeah, there's this little piece of, in, you know, even in the United States, we don't really have a gay problem until the Red Scare. And then there's this, oh, well, if you're gay, it could be used to turn you into a traitor.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, so could anything else, but they latched onto that. And then we sort of pushed it all underground.
What about the 50s and, you know, all that?
So then that's what happens is there's this, that's the 50s, the Red Scare. And there's this resurgence of Christian conservatism.
50s. For some reason, I always think 80s. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
There's this resurgence of Christian conservatism in the United States that pushes it even further. And suddenly gay becomes a dirty word. And it's not until much later, 70s, 80s, where we start to get that sexual freedom again. But yeah.
I would say the anti-gay feelings began in the 30s, at least.
Yeah.
Because you had a lot of crime literature with gay criminals, like the Maltese Falcon is the most well-known example. That would later lead into the Villains of Diamonds Are Forever and other.
Right, with the Gunsel.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so much fun.
Gunsel is the slang for the assistant to Caspar Gutman in the novel, The Killer Called Wilmer, and Gunsel doesn't mean gunman like everybody thought. It was an old English slang word for a gay man.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, why was it important to you personally that your protagonist, you know, you're creating this world, nobody else. So why was it important to you that the protagonist be trans?
That was a decision I made very, very early on because I knew that I was going to be writing about the very masculine world of World War I and also Antarctic exploration. And there's that sort of, like, as I said, that sort of boy's own register that seems to come with the territory. And I wanted to defamiliarize that. I wanted to see it through the eyes of an outsider character that would maybe help the audience into that world, you know, our modern eyes on that world. But it had to be someone who felt that they did belong to that world. So it couldn't be someone who was too distant from it. So when I initially was tossing around ideas, I did think about, of course, the sort of classic Polly Oliver story, you know, the girl dresses up as a boy to go on an adventure. And I realized that I didn't quite want that because it needed to be someone who thought of themselves as male and thought of themselves as already belonging to that world and having it denied them. So that was really why it was important to me that Jonathan be a trans man, because I was looking for a way to make the very familiar story essentially a little bit unfamiliar, sort of fresh eyes on it, but also not so unfamiliar that audiences didn't feel like they were right there with him.
Well, All the White Spaces is, if you're in the UK, it's available now. If you're in the United States, it will be available March the 29th, 2022, which is 2 days from this present date. Guys, do you guys have any more questions for Ali about the book or anything else that
I
you
have a
want to ask her?
question.
Yeah, Rick, please.
Yes. Now, this goes back to your background as a barrister. Now, my knowledge of British law comes from watching Rumble of the Bailey and other.
Oh, it's just like that. It's just like that. You know everything you know with the wigs and the gowns. It is just like that, let me tell you.
Right.
Wow.
Well,
I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
from British shows, I get the impression that the judges can be very opinionated. And you can even tell
Yes.
the jury how to vote.
Yeah, I mean, judges are an absolute force of nature here. Of course, if you're doing a trial, it's the jury's opinion that matters at the end of the day. But for everything apart from that, it's the judge that calls the shots. So yes, they can sometimes be very larger than life figures, and every barrister has got maybe their own personal list of judges they've had run-ins with, and judges who are notorious. If you go to a particular courthouse, oh no, so-and-so is sitting that day, watch out for them, etc., etc. And, you know, there are some judges where sitting in the public gallery of their court when they're doing a busy list of sentences, pleas in mitigation, bail applications, nitty-gritty stuff like that, sitting in their public gallery is actually seen as something to do a day out in London, because
Oh, wow.
the way they absolutely go after the barristers is just legendary. So
Over
you
here,
develop a very, very thick skin for that sort of thing.
yeah, my wife always said that, you know, like her friends would be like that. The ultimate was one day to work your way up and then be a judge. Danielle was like, I never want to be a judge. You know, she was a great criminal prosecutor. She's like, it's boring. They're basically scorekeepers, you know, except for sentencing, you know. So she never wanted to be a judge. Now I have to ask you before we move on, because I've always wondered this, and every time I've wondered it, I've not been around where I can Google it. What is with the wigs? Why do they do that?
You mean you've never wanted to look like a posh court gentleman from the 1700s?
I guess not.
Wow. Well, it's, you know, it's every one of our dreams.
Oh, okay.
But seriously, it's one of those anachronisms that has really attached to the criminal bar more than any other branches of the bar. So there are areas of the bar in which people go to court and they'll have trials and they won't wear the wigs and gowns, and frankly, more power to them. The wigs are made of genuine horsehair. They're incredibly itchy, particularly in the summer. The gowns are very, very heavy. Again, they get caught in everything. You rip them on door handles. It's just an entire.
So they're not required. I guess I had the sense
only
they were
thing I was.
required. They're not required.
They're required
then?
in most criminal courts.
Oh,
They're required in most criminal courts. Yeah,
Okay.
crime has retained them more than all other areas of the law, and possibly for this reason, which I was certainly really grateful for, is that when you put on a wig and a gown and this little like white collar thing that goes up to there and cuts off your circulation, it's really uncomfy and also is an absolute nightmare to iron and starch. When you put all that on, no one looks at your face. Everyone looks at the stuff, the uniform. And so I can be in court with a client and he may have the worst grievance against me possible for like screwing up his case or ruining his prospects, etc., etc. I go into the robing room, which is a private room out back where the barristers get changed, take off all that stuff, and I could walk straight past him in the waiting room and he would not recognize me.
interesting. Wow.
It just so effectively anonymizes you, and that I think is a good enough reason to keep them, quite frankly, because that's quite useful, particularly I think for female barristers.
Yeah, Danielle was.
That's why you could be a zombie on the weekend and nobody would notice.
Danielle was threatened, stalked. You know, it definitely happens. So, kind of a dangerous question, but so I'm not going to ask you who your favorite authors working today are, but maybe some. Huh?
Mick, let me ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know that you did a lot of research on Antarctica, and we've already talked about that. But were there previous literary explorations of Antarctica and the horrors of Antarctica besides the Mountains of Madness that you read to prepare yourself for this?
I actually found there weren't that many set specifically in Antarctica as opposed to the Arctic. One that I greatly enjoyed and including, like, there's a little reading list in the back of my novel because I like to show my workings, was Thomas Keneally's Victim of the Aurora. The guy that wrote Schindler's Ark, the Australian writer, he wrote Victim of the Aurora, which is your classic locked room mystery set in Antarctic huts in the Edwardian era. And it's very spooky, it's very claustrophobic, it's not supernatural, but it's certainly creepy. I do think that we are sort of now moving into a sort of golden age for sort of polar and cold places horror, because I think more and more people are starting to say, hey, I like those sort of books. And so, like, even over the last couple of years, you have, so earlier on this year, I had the double bill of like Echo by Thomas Earl Hervelt, which is obviously a mountaineering supernatural thriller, and Road of Bones, of course, by Christopher Golden. So you've got all these ones which I think are now just starting to come out. So I couldn't find that much that was set in Antarctica specifically, apart from Mountains of Madness, Who Goes There. Paul Tremblay has a really good short story called The Ice Tower, which is in his Growing Things collection. That's really, it's a wonderful story about like the fascination of Antarctica. And that was really very much it. There's there are scenes in my book set in old whaling stations and so on and so forth. And the best visual reference I found for old whaling stations was actually, don't hate me, Alien versus Predator. I maintain is an underappreciated gem of a film. And I also maintain is actually a true successor in the Mountains of Madness heritage, because you've got the sort of ancient lithographs, and you've got the alien races, and you've got cloaking devices, and you've got the city. And I actually think that a lot of the parallels are there, and I think it's a wonderful film that's been very overlooked. So anyone can fight me on that, frankly, I don't care.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Pete, because it reminded me that at the end of the book, as Ali said, she does have this suggested further reading, and it's categorized. Suggested further reading. Here's the first batch, the First World War, and then the second one is the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. And then the last one is trans and queer history, and she's got 3 books listed there. So yeah, that's great.
So before we wrap up with you, like, who is your favorite author right now? Who are you really enjoying reading right now? Dangerous question. She's gonna leave somebody out. Yeah, well, I'm just trying to ruin your relationships.
I know. I'm gonna pick, I think, 3 must-read authors for me, in that I will read anything they come out with. The first is Paul Tremblay. I just think he's excellent. I cannot wait for the that guy. Yeah, that guy, right? I just love everything he does. I think even when I revisit his books, there's still something new to enjoy. I recently reread Disappearance at Devil's Rock and found it even better than I remembered.
Oh, you've read it. I've read it twice too. That's my favorite of Paul's books, and I've told him that. Yeah.
And it's so funny because, as I've said elsewhere, I read it for the first time before I'd seen Lake Mungo and didn't really vibe with it. Then I watched Lake Mungo, listened to him speaking about it, and then reread it, and it knocked my socks off.
Well,
So,
Paul and Nadia Bolkin and I did a Patreon podcast on Lake Mungo, and it was a lot of fun and very interesting. So if you're anyone out there, if you're a patron and you don't know about that one, look that one up on the Patreon podcast. So you can watch it or you can, listen to it. But yeah, he's not just a talented guy, but a really nice guy. So what are your other two?
My second one is Matt Veselowski, who is a British horror author. He writes this series of books called the Six Stories books. I don't know if anyone has come across them, but they are fantastic. The central conceit is that it's a podcast that a podcaster is hosting called Six Stories, in which he investigates an old supernatural inflected crime from the perspective of six witnesses. And the books are like reading a podcast transcript. So they're intensely Moorish. You'll just want to keep turning the pages. They've got that quality of a really good podcast. And they're very spooky. There's like one set in the woods. There's one set on the moors. His most recent one, Demon, sort of like looks at the child murderers of Jamie Bulger, which was a very famous murder that happened here in Britain. And it sets it sort of in sort of spooky moorland, and it introduces paranormal elements. So anything he writes in that series is just a guaranteed good time. You'll pick it up, you'll go straight through it. And the way he deals with conflicting accounts, it's very like Arthur Racken's stuff, like particularly like the novel of the Black Seal and stuff like that, where you've got, and the Three Imposters, where you've got all these separate accounts dealing with and talking around the central problem. And I just think it's masterful. It's really interesting.
I have not heard of him until now. This sounds absolutely fascinating. Matt wrote on the live cast, if you're watching on YouTube, he provided the link. Thank you, Matt, on Amazon. But what was his name is Matt. What was what's his last name?
Veselowski or Weselowski. I don't quite know how to pronounce it. I should have looked that up in advance. That is entirely my bad.
Yeah. Can you spell it off the top of your head, or do you need to look it up?
It's Wesolowski.
Okay. Because I will definitely be checking that out. And I wanted to ask you about this. Let me ask you about this, about him and about you. Are Matt's books, are they audiobooks too? Or are they on Audible? Do you know?
I think Matt's books may be on Audible. I'm not entirely certain.
Actually, I just looked and they are. Yes. Yeah.
I think they do really well as an audiobook as well because of the podcasty type format.
Right. That's what made me. That's what made me think of that. What about All the White Spaces? Is there an audiobook?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an audiobook that will be released on the same day as the US hardcover, which is the 29th of March. I'm so excited for it because obviously getting an audiobook is a bit of a dream for a debut writer. So it's by Scott Turner Schofield, who is a well-known trans activist and also trans actor, and he is just amazing. Like, I've had several conversations with him in the course of the recording, finding all these weird connections between him and me and family histories and so on and so forth. And he's just so open and generous and really interested in the subject material. So I just think he's a fantastic guy to voice Jonathan, because the novel's all in first person perspective. So whoever narrated the novel had to essentially be Jonathan Morgan. And I think he pulls that off so well.
Well, I told you that in hour 2, we were going to be talking about scariest scenes in movies. And you said that you really wanted to stick around for that. So I'm happy about that. So again, it's All the White Spaces, folks.
We need to hear the third author.
Oh, did I? I'm so sorry. Yeah.
You won't get off
Third
the hook
author.
without the third author.
The third author, I mean, guaranteed good time every time is Grady Hendrix.
Oh, yeah.
Like anything he puts out, you know it's going to be a fun read. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be scary. It's going to be well observed. Yeah, I just love everything he does. And I love the way he hops from setting to setting or genre to genre. I think it's great.
My old brain, I apologize, my old brain. That's why I have young people like Matt on the show to help me remember things like this. So
Before we finish the interview, I've got one question.
sure.
So Allie, you went from an 80,000 word journal entry book and then made it first person. Now I've got a book called Hellfighters where I completely rewrote it and changed the point of view and all these things. And it was just an incredibly difficult rewrite. So tell us something about that process.
Yeah, it was quite tough. So yeah, as you remarked, the book was originally written in its first draft form as a diary format, first person. And I quickly realized that the diary format was actually hampering me. It's very difficult, I think, to do diary format well in an adventure setting because you have to come up with reasons as to why the person's keeping the diary when they're finding the time to write everything down, and also the difficulty with immediacy, like fight scenes, action scenes, etc., dialogue, and so on. You've got to invite the audience to suspend a lot of disbelief as to how they're getting all this detail down. So the rewrite process, I want to say that I had like a particular technique or a trick I used, but I didn't. I literally just started the novel again in first person perspective and rewrote it scene by scene, putting it into first person perspective, taking out all the diary entry things and sort of just working through it bit by bit. And there were a couple of places where originally I'd done the sort of in media res opening to possibly to reassure the audience, as I said, that the spooky stuff is coming, you guys. So I had scenes which were the proverbial, help, help, I'm writing with the chair up against the door. Oh no, I hear it out. And I just took
Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft, Dagon. It's crashing through the window.
Yeah, I know. So I took all of those out and then shoved them in their rightful places in the narrative. And it meant, as I've said earlier, I really had to have conviction in the sort of slow burn nature of what I was doing. But yeah, it was interesting. I don't know a way to rewrite a novel except starting at the beginning and doing it chapter by chapter, which is cumbersome, but what you gonna do?
So it's All the White Spaces by Ali Wilkes, available on March 29th. Yes, there it is. And will be available on Audible and I assume Kindle as well. So
yes.
So and I am definitely going to check out Matt's books because that sounds absolutely fascinating. So thank you for referring us to him. So the complaint that I get from everybody in this show, and I know they're all thinking it right now, is that their TBR list goes up and up and up. So, but you know, thank you. Thank you for being here, Ali. Really appreciate it, especially so late for you.
I want to say thank you too really quickly. As a mom of a trans man, you know, representation is very important and being able to see yourself in stories is very important. And I wanted to thank you as well for explaining the difference of, you know, being a woman who dresses up or disguises herself as a man to go on an adventure and someone who is a man and is wanting to live that true life. And then there are women out there who want to be able to do male things and own that femininity while doing it as well. And those things are all very different. So kudos to you for creating this. And I'm really excited to read your story.
Thank you very much. That really touches me. Thank you.
I was thinking that, Bridget, but you know, that's not my story to share. I'm glad that you mentioned it. And, you know, you've shared with me some things about how it's hard for him and it's hard for you as a parent, you know, but you know, as a good parent, you want to be there for them. So, and you're a good parent. You're a good mom. I know you well enough to say that. So,
Thanks, Mike. I do my best.
Yes, and good point, Ali. You know, I always think of to normalize this more and more in representation and so forth. I always think of a scene in the first season of The Flash, which is really the only season I enjoyed, but that's a different topic, where the police captain is gay and he gets injured, ends up in the hospital, and Barry's foster dad is there out in the hallway with the doctor, and the captain is engaged, and his partner comes in and wants to see him, and the doctor or nurse, I forget who it was, says only immediate family is allowed in. I'm sorry. And Barry's foster dad goes, they're engaged. That makes him immediate family. And the doctor goes, oh, of course, and lets him in. And how they just did not make this huge deal out of it. Like, this is a normal part of everyday life. And I thought that was so well done. You know, that's just more representation. Sometimes you do need to make a big deal out of it, but you also need to show that, hey, these are normal people trying to live their lives just like you are, you know? So yeah, I'm sure your book is going to mean in that way to a lot of people. So
thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of normalizing representation, it's a bit strange to say, but one of the shows I had in mind when I was constantly when I was writing it is big pirate drama Black Sails, which is both a swashbuckling historical pirate show, but also has some of the best and most nuanced, I think, description of depiction of LGBT identities, and also people of color, sex workers, and all of that that I've ever really seen in a mainstream show. And it's done more or less without comment, and in a way that's respectful to who these people are. And as you say, showing that they are as much a fabric of day-to-day life and as much a fabric of history as anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. And okay, so let's talk about scary scenes in movies. And as I've said several times, not scariest movies you've seen, but scariest scenes in movies. And before we get there, to the audience, do me a couple favors if you would. Help the podcast to grow. You can do things like comment and click the like button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else like iTunes, Apple, Spotify, I don't know how each of those work, but I do know that if you leave a review on Apple/iTunes, whatever they're calling themselves, that helps a lot overall. So I'd really appreciate that. Leave reviews for us, especially if you like the show. Leave an honest 5-star review. I'm kidding, but it does help. And let's see what else here. I want to point out that Kevin Lucia, who writes one of my favorite types of horror, quiet horror, like Charles Grant, and I really think that Kevin Lucia is a worthy successor to Charles Grant. He's got a new book coming out on April the 1st, and it's called The Night Road. And you can pre-order that on Kindle for 99 cents. So, nothing. And he's definitely a writer to read. And if you haven't read any of his other stuff and you like that quiet horror stuff like I do, check him out. Also, a newer book came out in February, but I haven't mentioned it on the show yet. It just went right under my radar, and I want to correct that right now. Gemma Files, who's a genius writer, In That Endlessness, Our End is the name of the, have you read that? You look really excited, Ali.
It's so great. I'm halfway through it at the moment because I'm reading a story a night in bed before I go to sleep. Perfect.
Oh, good time to do it. Yeah, it's a Gemma Files collection. In that endlessness, our end. And please buy it. Please read it. I really love the description of this book, and I'll read some of it. Come closer, friend. Let me tell you a story. Have you heard the one about the Airbnb that eats your dreams, or the Iron Crown King who preys on his own bloodline from the air, still smoldering centuries after being burnt alive? How about the cloudy antique bottle you can wish your excess rage inside? Or that crooked alley down which something awaits to replace your disappointing child with a far more pleasant facsimile? Did I say that right? Facsimile? We all know the truth, especially in times like these, in an anxiety-ridden, sleepless world such as ours. It's only our very worst dreams that come true. Here, streets empty out and people pull themselves apart like amoebas, breeding murderous doppelgangers from their own flesh. Magic word for me, doppelganger. Houses haunt, ideas possess, and a cold and alien moon stares down, whispering that it's time to spawn. New myths and ancient evils descend. From the seemingly mundane terrors of a city just like yours to all the most dark and distant places of a truly terrible universe, nothing is as it seems. Not even that dimly recalled cinematic memory you've been chasing all these years. The one you think might just be something you stumbled upon while flipping through channels after midnight. The one that still disturbs you enough to raise a cold sweat all over your body whenever you try to will its details clear. I just said I wasn't going to read it all, and I did anyway. So, I mean, now that is a description for a book. So yeah. And then, one more thing. Yves Torgny, I'm sure I'm saying his name incorrectly, but he's come out with a Laird Barron bibliography, current through, I think it's, 2000 through 2020. He was kind enough to send me a copy. And it's really cool. If you're a Laird Barron fan, you really need this. Now, as far as everything I've mentioned here, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening later, I'm including the links to all these in the show notes. So, if you're on YouTube, watching on your computer, click that, see more, and you'll see, just keep scrolling down and you'll see links to all of this stuff. So let's see, I think I covered everything with what I wanted to talk about, except one thing. Archive 81, this is crazy. You guys remember a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, we had these guys on the show. Archive 81 is not getting renewed for a second season. Now, what kind of fucking world am I living in where Archive 81 ends on a cliffhanger like that and it's not renewed? What the hell is Netflix thinking? This thing, it was a great show.
Well, and as far as horror shows go on Netflix, to be in the top 10 when it debuted is a huge success for a genre series.
I mean,
and
what
for
are they
them to
throwing
say,
darts at the wall? Okay, if we hit Archive 81, it's out. It's just drunken darts. That's how we choose,
They're like, oh, the success didn't match the budget. What more of a success do you need to be in the top 10?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It wasn't that big a budget.
No, it couldn't have been.
I mean, yeah, I can't imagine it being that big. Most of it was him sitting in a room and then, the girl character, I forgot her name, and talking to different people around the apartment with her handheld camera.
Yeah. So
yeah, we're not talking a lot of CGI,
Right.
Yeah, it's just it's crazy. I honestly do not get this. What, Rick?
I think only the last episode had CGI in it, or the next to last.
Right.
The last two made.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Ultimately, I'm remembering back that we used to talk about how there was going to be this thing that I thought of as the Netflix effect, that even if a series was on regular television was just okay, you would finish it you would create a storyline that ended so that you could market it to Netflix for reruns or whatever. So, look, we have a completed story arc. We can sell that to you. People will enjoy this. And Netflix used to pick up stories, things that got canceled, and finish them so that they could bank them.
Yeah.
And now, you don't even need a full season. A decent writer could wrap up that cliffhanger with 3-4 episodes.
I saw comment after comment after comment on social media after it first came out, how much people loved it, and there better goddamn well be a second season so we can find out what happens next. And I thought, this is a no-brainer. There's going to be a second season.
So somebody out there, please pick this up, make a movie out of it at the very least, so we know what happens to Dan.
Well, come on. It's like they never did anything to pick up alphas.
No.
And that ended in a huge cliffhanger. And that was that. You're just stuck.
Yeah. Well, listen.
I'm still bummed out about Carnival.
Oh, me too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm still bummed out about what was that? Invasion. Set in fictional Homestead, Florida.
Yeah.
Of course, this is 2005, but still.
That was a summer when we had 3 alien invasion stories.
Right.
What was going on in Florida?
Still have the right to be angry about this.
What I will say to Bridget is, from a writer's standpoint, the fact that that's stuck for you, that's as good as it gets. I mean, a little bit of enigma and not knowing, you'll never get over that.
I guess. But I mean, at least search the podcast. You can listen to the Arcade 81 podcast. It's not exactly the same.
I'm sure the Netflix CEO watches this show. So I'm sure he's listening right now. And
I just want to put everything into perspective.
Correct this. Yes.
But that's one thing. But what's worse is finally getting a continuation and having it not satisfied.
That's true.
Twin Peaks.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And after that, he hadn't made a sequel. Because the continuation just made it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, to put things in perspective, today I finished the 7th season of DC's Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of bowed out.
No, and I will say that this had to be the worst season I'd ever watched.
Oh, man. Okay, I didn't get that far, so good to know.
It just, here. You didn't like it either?
No, I gave up after like the 4th season.
Oh, yeah. I watched it because I thought it was completely ridiculous. It broke a lot of rules. It was sort of like the 70s DC. I kind of expected like stupid characters to show up, and they did. Mm-hmm. Lots of stupidity, but it was fun. And it was a nice counterbalance to the rest of the Arrow universe, which I thought took itself way too seriously.
Yeah.
This last season was like, I'm sitting there going like, this is not good.
Well, speaking of ridiculousness and torturing Pete Rawlik, we're going to do a kind of a Mystery Science Theater 3000. I'm shooting for April 8th, but none of these people have bothered to email me back yet. And so we're all gonna watch that and comment. DeBronzo picked out, what did he pick out?
Miami Connection.
Miami Connection, yeah, thank you. So yeah, this is gonna be a lot of fun. It's a totally ridiculous movie by all accounts.
Yeah. All right,
let's talk about scariest scenes. Who wants to start? You know what? I put this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, maybe a couple of people will, give me some scariest scenes, and that'd be cool. Well, the thread went on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
yes,
I'm just going to give you one scene now, and then if it doesn't get around to it, I'll mention another scene later.
All right.
But I watched this movie when I was 15. Just before we went on a family vacation to the North Carolina coast, Jaws. And I am not really, I don't enjoy gore, a lot of gore. And the idea that there's going to be, gore, it's like, oh, well, that scene where like they're just bantering and Brody has to chum the water. And he said it's like they tell the Richard Dreyfuss character, just keep it straight ahead, because he's like piloting the boat. And Brody says, I can hold it straight ahead. He's just trying this shit. So the audience starts to laugh. The shark head pops up out of the water. The whole audience, including me, went, "Wah!" Practically jumped back in their chairs. A lot of people screamed. I don't think I screamed, but no one was recording, so I can't say for sure.
Well, there are, and
that was a super scary scene in a thrilling movie.
Yeah, and that's legit. There are scariest scenes that are jump scares like that one, and then there are scariest scenes like in the movie Signs, where he's out in the cornfield and you just see the alien foot go into the corn just like that. I mean, talk about the easiest, no special effect, or in The Changeling when the ball bounces down the stairs. Such a simple thing that is so creepy. But I think my absolute favorite of all time is in, I don't know if you'd even call it a horror movie. It's certainly a thriller. It's in the movie Zodiac.
Yes.
When Jake Gyllenhaal's character goes into the basement of, I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't seen it, but I've seen Zodiac 5 times. And they go down in the basement for some reason, and then the sense of dread just slowly builds. I won't tell you why. And then Jake Gyllenhaal's character, he hears a creak, like somebody walking around slowly upstairs. And he said, I thought you said we were the only ones in the house. And the guy says, we are. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm not doing this scene justice, but it's one of the creepiest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. So that's my, I think, my biggest one.
This is
That's
the
a really
movie
creepy one.
projectionist.
Sorry?
The other character is a movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to narrow it down for people who haven't seen the movie.
Yeah. So
I took kind of a different little vein with it. When you originally said this, I wrote down a couple of things, but then I also went and looked at, so Rotten Tomatoes came up with a list of the scariest movie scenes.
Ooh.
October of last year, because I wanted to compare. I wanted to see if I agreed or disagreed. So,
right.
Firstly, I'll say a couple of mine that aren't on this list. So probably the earliest scene that scared me to death that I can remember was an Evil Dead, the tree assault is all what I'll call it. Absolutely terrifying. Then also on my list that aren't on this list, speaking of Signs, I love that alien reveal scene where he's watching the TV and they first show the alien. I just think that scene is so brilliant, as well as being scary.
Phoenix is like,
yes, half of what makes it so scary is his reaction. It's just great.
Yeah, and I think he actually puts his hand over his mouth. He's like, like that,
Yeah, it's great because I can just imagine if there's something going on in the world and you're watching the TV and you see it, it makes it that much more real. And I just,
the other creepy scene in that movie was when his 2 kids are reading this book about UFOs, and Mel Gibson's like, they're telling them to be respectful of the book and everything, which is kind of funny. And they open up one page and it looks exactly like their house with a man and 2 kids dead on the lawn. And I just thought that was creepy as hell.
Super creepy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you ready for this list?
Yes.
I'm curious to see if you guys agree or disagree. So on the top is the chest burst scene from Alien.
Jump scare one, yeah, it scared me as a kid.
Jump scare, but okay.
Yeah, I think what makes that one scary more is the actors' reactions because they didn't know that was going to happen.
So
I've heard that.
I will suggest to you that the scene later in that film where Lambert has been cornered and the tail wraps around her and draws her in closer is much creepier. it doesn't rely on the jump scare at all. It relies on the building of tension.
Yeah,
But-
that's a good point. Let's see. The next one is from Babadook when Babadook breaches the bedroom.
You know, I can't comment because I didn't really like Babadook.
I didn't either, and that scene didn't stick out to me, so I'm going to say no.
Okay, go ahead.
The Blair Witch Project, Mike in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Absolutely, absolutely. a
I
classic
liked it.
image.
I didn't think it was scary. I liked it.
The first time I watched it, I was probably 28 or so, and I watched it in the theater with a friend, and it was very scary for me, especially that scene. And then I rewatched it recently, like a year and a half ago, with Danielle and Logan, and I was like, I don't find it scary at all now. But you know, back then that scene with him standing in the corner, that was just creepy as fuck.
Well, you know, sometimes we like to think we aren't, but we're susceptible to societal hype, because when
Yeah,
The Exorcist first came out, there are all these stories of people vomiting in the aisle or passing out or having to call an ambulance to the theater. And I had tried to sneak in when I was like 14 and they wouldn't let me in the theater. And so I finally saw it and I was in college. I think I was 20. And it was like, not only is it not scary, but this movie is not very good. It's like, it's just because in its moment, it was
Right.
what people wanted to be scared by.
Right. And that's a good point. What's your next one, Bridget?
All right. Then they have The Conjuring 2 when the nun comes to life. It was pretty creepy, I would say, but not like terrifying.
I liked the first two Conjuring movies, although I hear that the real life people are despicable, but Pete violently agrees with me about Conjuring, so, you know.
All right. Well, the next one Allie will like. It's The Descent when the monsters are revealed.
Yes.
Yes, that was actually when Mike asked me to think about my scariest scenes in horror movies. That's actually at the top of my list. It's the point at which the cavers, they're all underground, they're all stuck down there, creepy shit's been going down, and they've got this infrared camera. So it's all washed out and it's jerky like found footage, and it turns and you see the monster and I think what makes that work is that the monster is just behind that person, not in the background of the shot, but literally within touching distance of that person. I think it's just one of the greatest jump scares I've ever seen because it's so immediate. It's really visceral.
And I love your this could be we could apply this to a lot of books. We're going to describe the next horror book as creepy shit is going down.
Yes.
Yeah. Our new logo. I love it.
Okay, so the next one is a 95% Don't Look Now from 1973, The Ending. And I would say as a kid, this movie creeped me out so much that I haven't even watched it since then, and I need to watch it again.
I don't remember that. Is that the Sutherland movie?
Yes, with the
Okay.
girl in the red coat that he sees all over Venice
Yeah, okay.
after his daughter died.
All right. What else you got?
All right, the next one is The Exorcist. They picked the spinning head scene, which I think isn't, that one's so unreal that it's not scary to me. There were so many other scenes that were scary to me. One of them, honestly, that creeps me out the most is when Reagan comes downstairs during the party and then she pees herself. That terrifies me as a parent, like that you just know there's something wrong with her.
I can see that as a parent. Yeah, you'd be like, oh shit, something's wrong and I don't know what it is. And that scares me even more.
I thought the scene where she attacks the doctor was the scary.
Yes. And on Matt's point, I actually saw something recently where they were talking about The Exorcist and why people were so scared of it. And it was the first time that I personally had seen in a documentary where they actually asked people what scene it was that scared them. And the thing that was making a lot of people get nauseous was the spinal tap scene when they put the needle in her back. So I found that kind of interesting because I'd always assumed that it was, some of the more demonic stuff that was making people puke and run out. But it turns out it was a lot of the medical stuff in the beginning that was creeping people out. Or
That's
when
my patients throw up and run away all the time.
Yeah, and that's right when they meet you. That's right when they meet you, Matt.
But some people did say when she spoke in the satanic voice that creeped them out. So I can see that.
Really?
So what's your next one?
When she spoke like Demi's mom is what creeps me out.
But we're so used to that now that it.
Yeah, true.
True.
What else you got?
The next one is Eyes Without a Face, 1959. Let's see the central surgery scene.
Okay.
Well, that's
when
more,
they take her face off, and more medical horror, basically.
That's more grotesque than scary. I've seen this movie several times.
Yeah.
The next one is Hereditary, the allergic reaction scene. Because it's a kill off the main character kind of thing. But
I don't remember that scene.
No. Okay. The next one is It Follows. The Tall Man Arrives.
Right.
Yeah, that's
right.
So
I love that movie. That's one of my favorite horror movies. You're talking about the part where he appears and he walks through the other girl to get to her. Yeah. And just the dread of the movie, the inevitability that this is going to get you no matter what. Which I forget which book they're reading from, but it alludes to that. So
on Netflix, there's a show called 30-Second Horror, and the first episode of season 1 has a tall man episode. It is really good.
I'll have to watch that. The next one is Jaws, the opening scene. So that supports Matt's theme for sure.
Did you guys know about Jaws? What I read was, correct me if it's wrong, but they couldn't get the Jaws
Bruce.
Yeah, whatever, to work. So what they did, that's why he doesn't show up till halfway through the movie. And it's better for the movie. It builds the suspense. So yeah.
The next one is Martyrs, which I haven't seen, but it's a transcendental experience scene.
Martyrs. Oh, I haven't seen it. Rick, did you need to say something? Want to say something?
I was going to say when George finally shows up in full form in the last scene, he looks phony. So it's the climactic scene when he's killing Robert Shaw. Shaw doesn't look good at all.
It's looking pretty scary in a falling apart way at Universal Studios by now, probably.
Any others?
Zombie Shark.
Yeah, so there's just a few more from Misery when Annie breaks Paul's legs.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And that's not what she does in the book, just FYI.
No. More body horror, I guess.
Yeah.
The Orphanage, which I haven't seen, Knock Knock Game.
Okay.
You talking about the Guillermo del Toro?
Yes.
Nod from Pete.
Yeah.
That's a good movie. Yeah.
All Del Toro movies are good.
Most of them.
Any more?
Yeah, there's a couple more. Paranormal Activity, The 21st Night.
Okay.
Are you talking about where it shows that she stands over the bed,
fully possessed Katie leaves the bedroom and lures Micah out.
Yeah, for me in that movie, the creepiest scene where she's just standing by him like for hours.
I agree.
That's creepy. That's not jump scare creepy. That's just that's dread.
Yes. The next one I think probably most people would agree with, which is the shower kill from Psycho.
I was going to mention that as one of my favorites because you have to put that back into context.
Right.
Like if you think it's pretty tame now, back then there was nothing like it. And even though they don't show the nudity or the helplessness, they don't show the actual piercing of the flesh. It's all implied in your face with brilliant buildup of tension and now iconic music.
It's some of the best music ever used in a horror scene.
An interesting fact about that movie. Am I remembering right? Hitchcock, right?
Yes.
Right.
He actually filmed some nudity of her because he wanted to keep the shower scene, the way that you see it in the movie. So he wanted to give them something to say, oh no, this is we can't do this, but you can keep this, which is precisely why he did it.
Interesting.
He knew it would never get out there.
Then he did. Well, I hope then he destroyed the footage if he didn't have Janet Leigh's permission.
Well, that would be the honorable thing to do, but who knows?
We know some things now about him that make us wonder if he didn't.
Yeah.
Oof.
Anything else, Bridget?
That film, everybody was giving him a hard time when he was thinking about doing it because it was horror, and that seemed to be low rent at the time. And it ended up being, the biggest thing he had done to that point. And it really gave horror a shot in the arm as legitimacy. And of course, The Birds is very horror-esque. But
that was actually one of my other ones that I had was the scene in the school where she's sitting on the shelf. She doesn't notice it, but the audience is watching the birds accumulate on the jungle gym.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And
My wife.
again, you think about when was it filmed compared to what is out here now?
Yeah.
40 or 50 years later, it's just so original and brilliant and scared the hell out of me when I saw it.
That scared the hell out of Danielle. She's always told me. And the other thing that scared the hell out of her, every once in a while I annoy her and go tap, tap, tap. Because the scene in Salem's Lot where the young vampire floats up to the window and he's like, let me in, tap, 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 just freaked her out like crazy. So,
It's not on my list, but one of the classic Hitchcock scenes, you talk about, Mike, you like the tension building, is these guys are in the hold of this boat and there's a glass on the table and they don't know it, but the boat is sinking. And so you see the level of the water in that glass begin to tilt slowly and slowly and slowly. And the people in the scene have no idea what's going on, but the audience does. And it's just a tremendous tension builder.
yeah. Pete, do you have any scenes?
Yes, I do.
I bet you do.
All right.
Do you
So-
watch a lot of movies, Pete?
I do watch a lot of movies.
Do you? Okay.
Let me guess, Cannibal Holocaust is on there.
No. Actually, I turned it off. I don't deal good with what I call torture porn.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
No.
work for me.
No,
It's-
me
The
either.
gross out is easy. I don't find any art to it.
Yes.
So on that
Agreed.
note, this one haunted me for years and still creeps me out. The Tar Man from Return of the Living Dead. When he first shows up,
Yeah.
that freaked me out. It gives me the chills.
That's a really underrated movie too.
I really enjoy that film, and I think it's a really good genre film.
And the guy who directed that was it Dan Bannon? Didn't he write one of the Alien movies?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Donald Sutherland,
Yes.
everybody loves the final scene. That's the one everybody says it creeps them the hell out. When Donald Sutherland's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that scene.
What freaks me out the most is the dog hobo. That where the pod's tendrils have hit two different things, and they've created this fusion of the two. And it's this dog with the face of a human being, and it just barks, and it's like, oh, it just that just made me kind of weird, you know.
That's a good one.
That movie's
So
been
that's
made
what
three-
made you
remade
weird,
three
you're saying.
times, and all three of them are good.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I've really enjoyed it. I think that the one with who's the Australian actress?
There's only one in Australia. I think there's
Yeah, I was
a
gonna
lot
say,
more Australian
which-
actors.
She was married to Tom Cruise.
Oh, Nicole Kidman,
Nicole
Yeah,
Kidman.
okay.
Nicole Kidman's is
the only actress
yes,
Australia has ever produced.
that's right. Anyway, that one I think is underrated, but it's still pretty good. There's a low budget cosmic horror film called Yellow Brick Road.
Oh God, yeah, that movie is creepy.
And there is a scene where one of the characters is hacking up another character, but it's done in complete silence and through the lens of a pair of binoculars. So your point of view is from someone who can see it, but can't hear it and can't do anything about it. And that feeling of helplessness,
Yeah.
and still seeing something terrible, just, that gets me. And now,
Yeah.
go ahead. I have one more, and it's a Hitchcock film,
Okay.
but it's not any of his horror films.
Rear Window.
It is in Vertigo, and it's about halfway through the film, and everything horrible has happened, and the female lead has been killed, and Johnny has met the girl that he thinks looks like her, and he's been taking her and getting the right clothes and the right shoes, and they get the right dress, and he's like, yes, this is perfect. And then his hand reaches out and he touches her hair, and she's like, no. It's like, it can't matter to you. And it's at that moment that you realize that Jimmy Stewart is the villain, that he has become a monster, that he is, so obsessed with this woman that is dead that he's turning some other woman into her.
Yeah.
And doesn't care. And it's so well done, and it's so subtle. It took me a long time to realize as a moviegoer that that's what was happening, was that the hero had transformed into a villain. And he has just become the creepy, obsessed boyfriend that can't let this dead person go.
Well, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
I heard that somewhere.
I guess everybody here knows this, but the surreal scene in that where they're pulling down the pictures with Salvador Dali, they got Salvador Dali to create the visuals and set up that scene for that.
He also did the same thing for The Suspicion.
We're going to wrap up in about 15 to 20 minutes. And I know it's late for Allie, so I want to ask her next about her scariest scenes. You mentioned one so far.
Yeah, I think two of my others both really play off that sort of helplessness thing that we were just mentioning, when you can see something horrible, but you are powerless to do anything about it. And what I thought about was the found footage clips that you get in Sinister. So you get lawn work, pool party, these really harrowing, very shakily, very nebulously shot depictions of families being murdered by their children. And I just think those are some of the scariest found footage I've ever seen, because it's all very quiet. You're at a bit of a remove, but you can see everything. It's really, I found that sort of viscerally frightening, because you can put yourself in the position of the people who are being killed.
Yeah, Sinister is actually one of my favorite horror films.
I love it.
Such a good job.
Yeah, I think it's really good. It does such a good job of mythology and world building, but also has a fair few jump scares, something for everyone. But I think that helplessness is what really gets me. And so the other thing that I was thinking about, because I rewatched it the other day, is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I was thinking about the dinner party scene where she wakes up and she's tied to that chair and the family are all laughing and joking and it's unhinged. And then there's the grandfather who's like, and they're trying to get the grandfather to suck her blood or to kill her, and they keep dropping the cleaver, and it's almost comedy, but it's just got this really nasty edge of, it's not funny, it's just you're in the presence of utter madness. I think I found that particularly scary as well.
Yeah.
And that's one movie that if it was a big budget movie, it never would have worked. The fact that it was so low budget made that movie more effective.
Yeah, I think so. It feels very, very real, and it also feels very, very grimy.
And it feels almost documentary because they do that documentary thing at the beginning of it. Yeah.
I didn't think of this, but later tonight I will go back and I will amend the show notes. I should say I will add on the show notes the three. I think I posted it in 3 places: on Twitter, on my personal Facebook page, and then on the big Lovecraft eZine page. And I'll share the direct link to those threads because a lot of people shared some really good stuff. For example, here's session 9. Derek Scholl says, session 9, when the guy with nyctophobia was in an underground tunnel and the lights started going out one by one. You know,
It's a good scene.
Session 9 is just creepy as hell in general.
I so need to persevere with session 9. I've started to watch it twice and it's never really sort of managed to dig its claws into me, but I hear so much about how good it is, and I think it's just one where I need to just get on with it and watch it all the way through before I have any opinions.
Yeah, I think it does move a little slowly at first, but then it's a slow burn, but it gets there. Yeah. Who did I miss? Matt, Bill, anybody else? Rick?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. The end of one of the closing scenes in Vincent Price's The Fly. The half human, half fly in the web.
Yeah.
That just creeped me out. Help me, help me.
Yeah.
In Sleepy Hollow, there's a scene where there's, I believe it's the mother of the kid who has the child, must be about 7 years old, hide under the floorboards when the headless horseman comes and kills her. And right when you think he's about to leave, he suddenly realizes the kid is under the floorboards and tears them up.
Yeah.
And that just totally devastates.
Yeah. Any others you want to mention, Rick?
Yeah. The Tingler, another Vincent Price movie, has the concept, there's a great concept that there is a centipede-like creature living in our spines that lives on fear. And the final line after they have a very creepy scene is, if you don't believe, Vincent Price's voice comes on, he goes, if you don't believe in the Tingler, next time you're afraid, don't scream. And that line resonated with me. On a different note, the original movie version of The Thing, which had James Arness as the monster, that's somewhat pales besides John Carpenter's special effects extravaganza. But what creeped me out was not the monster, but the note on which it ends. We have a newspaper reporter who's been covering this monster running amok, and it wasn't a shapeshifter, it was just a giant rampaging humanoid.
It's a monster carrot.
Right. He was part vegetable. the reporter gives a broadcast and he says, "Watch the skies. There's many more of these." And that is just an horrific note to end on. And that sent a creep down my spine when I saw it. That's like a 12-year-old kid.
All right. Anybody else?
Just one.
I'm sorry,
One last one. One last
I
one.
apologize.
There's a Spanish horror movie called La Residencia. So it's known in English as The House That Screams and Finishing School, made around 1970. And in some ways, it's just Psycho in a girls' school. But it's very subtly directed. And at the end, when they unmask the killer, who you probably would have guessed it is such a creepy scene. I don't want to spoil it. And that's it.
All right. Anybody else real quick?
Can I go last?
Sure.
the
Matt, did you
scene-
go? And I
Yeah, I did.
didn't remember.
Oh, to me.
You're good? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
So the scene in 7 where they go into the bedroom, the guy's laying there and he's all emaciated, and they have all the photographs where he's been there laying there for a month, and it's really dark and they're really close up on all the welts on his body and stuff, and he's emaciated and he's very skeletal, and then it turns out he's alive. He gasps for
God,
breath.
yeah.
Yeah,
That was just such a well done scene. They built that so well, because all the other bodies they found have been bodies, and this dude was alive, and it was a total shock. It was so well done.
There's a scene in Millennium like that, episode 1 of the Millennium TV show, where this guy's been buried in a box, and they're expecting a corpse, and they open up, and he's alive, and his eyes are taped. His eyes are what's the word I'm looking for? They're sewed shut. His mouth is sewed shut, if I remember right. It's just, I was like just horrified by that. I'm amazed they got away with it on TV in the 90s, you know. So
my second one was I went on the big screen. I saw one of the early 3D movies. It was called Parasite, and I was there with my cousin, and these parasites are invading these people, and it's got this really slow dolly in on this guy's face, and it's so slow, and you're wondering what is going on, and then the parasite jumps out of his face into the screen, into your face, into your eyes in 3D. And I honestly had to change my underwear after that scene. That was such a good jump scare in 3D. And my last one is from a movie we've already talked about, but when I was a teenager, we had to drive 25 miles over these curvy roads to get to the movie theater. And we got to see Alien. We went to Alien, and we were the last people in the theater. And so all 4 of us had to sit on the front row. And you're looking like this.
oh yeah, I hate
The
that.
movie
Yeah.
screen is like 40 feet tall, and your neck is craned. And when she's going through the big air ducts with the fire flame turns around, and the alien's like this right behind her. All the other people with me were Christians, and I went, "Oh shit!" Just as loud as I could, because it completely scared me. I wish that happened more often.
I'll share several other books that I'm reading on Kindle. The first 2 are actually on Kindle Unlimited. One is called Twice Told. It's edited by C.M. Mueller. And it's about doppelgangers, which probably explains to you, anyone who's been watching this show for a while or listening to it, why I'm reading it. So the next one, and I'm really plowing through this one, is called You See the Monster by Luke Smitherd. Now, this is my first introduction to Luke Smitherd. And this is a really immersive book, and it's really, really creepy. It's called You See the Monster by Luke Smitherd. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so check that out. And then I'm reading Where All Is Night and Starless by John Linwood Grant. Linwood Grant, excuse me. Where All Is Night and Starless. And the guy's just a wizard. He really is. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, he wrote one of those stories for me.
Sorry?
He wrote one of those stories for me.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
That's
I haven't got that far either yet, because he has notes at the end of each story about why he wrote them or things like that. Let's see what else. It's some good news for everyone. Matt Carpenter has started watching The X-Files. And
oh, come on, this is a rewatch.
Oh, it's a rewatch?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I just.
That's not nearly as much fun. I was gonna shoot for a national holiday or something, but
no, I fine.
But you're certainly on our comment thread bitching about it and how it's not that great. Have you got to EBE yet? That's a great episode.
Oh, I like the whole series pretty much.
Okay.
Wasn't that judgmental back then. I'm old.
Well, that's very true.
Don't need you whippersnappers telling me what to do, I'll say. Get off my lawn.
So in case you missed it earlier, Lovecraft eZine t-shirts, and we're going to have some more. And I've got a few new URLs to make it easier for everybody. Lovecraft eZine Patreon.com will take you directly to the Patreon. Lovecraft eZine swag will take you to the Lovecraft eZine t-shirt store. You know, all this stuff on t-shirts, you can get it on a coffee mug, get it on a hoodie, magnets, you know, all kinds of things. I think I'm going to order myself a coffee mug. There's four different styles right now available, and we're working on some more. And I'm just really excited about it. If you're going to Necronomicon, wear your Lovecraft eZine t-shirts and take a selfie, send it to me, lovecraftezine@gmail.com, and I'm going to find a really great prize, and I'll pick somebody at random, and it will be a really great prize, so just to motivate you. So,
I've got just the prize.
What?
It is a paperback copy of World War Cthulhu, but it's the one with the color art. All 20 some of the Wayne Miller prints in full color. They're gorgeous.
That is a good prize. Maybe we'll do more than one prize. So just, yeah.
Well, I'm going to win, so I'm sending it to myself. So.
Oh, okay. Well, wear a Lovecraft eZine t-shirt. You'll have a better chance of it.
Okay, so I do have a prize.
What do you have to leave? Is that why you keep holding this book up?
No, I'm getting ready for you to be done.
I'm not done. God. Wow. Is this your way of saying this, Mike, you're boring? Let's finish this up.
I would never say anything so subtly.
No, you wouldn't. Here's something fun. We're now on Lovecraft eZine is now on TikTok because, you know, I'm all that with the new kids and all the new kid things. So right now we have one video on there, Victor Laval saying why he's a patron and why he listens to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. So watch what you say, okay? Got it? Quit denigrating Victor.
It's not him, it's you.
Oh, jeez, that's right. I get confused.
I'm a shameless fanboy around him. It's like, whoa.
So is Handelman. Here's some good news.
It's like us chasing him through the lobby was pretty pathetic last Necronomicon.
This is really cool. This is really sweet. Danielle made me aware of this. A new hotline gives you options for joy, and this is from teenagers. And says, call a new hotline and you'll get just that. I'm reading from NPR. Encouraging words from a resilient group of kindergartners. Kids' voices will prompt you with a menu of options. If you're feeling mad, frustrated, or nervous, press 1. If you need words of encouragement and life advice, press 2. If you need a pep talk from kindergartners, press 3. we tried this. It's really, really cute, and it's not cheesy. It's really neat. And, you know, we all in the creative field, so much of us do at times suffer from depression. And I just really wanted to share this. I think it's really sweet that they did this. And the number says the next time you need a little boost, call 707-998-8410. So again, that's of course the United States number, but 707-998-8410.
I'm not going to get rickrolled here, right?
Pardon me?
I'm not going to get rickrolled here, right?
What does that mean?
You don't know what rickrolling means? Oh boy.
No.
I can't even explain it to you, Mike. Yeah. But
We'll explain it to you after the show.
yeah.
Is it that bad?
No, it's just
Am I like an old fogey but that I don't understand this?
yes.
Try to remember how I grew up,
guess
okay? You know, I'm still have gaps in my knowledge. I'm learning all the time.
You're just
Yeah.
lucky you don't know, I guess.
I guess. Okay, are we missing anything? Matt wants to show his goddamn prize. Just do it.
Okay, so remember to send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put classic in the subject heading, and you will be entered in the drawing for this book from Kickstarter, Famous Monsters Unleashed. Are you in this one, Pete?
No, I am not in that one. And
Well, you should have been.
we sent a really good story in, and we got a note back saying that they had too many stories in that field. Because there's like 5 Dracula stories.
A figure.
So
Oh, by the way, speaking of vampire stories, my mom loves vampires. So I did some research, and apparently a thick book called The Historian is one of the best vampire books ever written.
yeah. I might have signed copies of that in the storehouse.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah, let's see if I can dig one up for you.
I thank you. I appreciate that.
It deals with the historical Vlad Dracula.
Yes.
Yeah, mom's listening to it on Audible. I would never say, and it could never be said, that I'm sharing my Audible account with my mother. So I explicitly am not doing that if Amazon ever watches this. Matt said in an email recently, and I want to discuss this on a later podcast because I really do think this is interesting, despite the fact that Matt brought it up. Matt says, so we were discussing the podcast at dinner, and it occurred to me that my 22 and 23-year-old sons consume media completely differently than I do, seldom watching any sort of mainstream movie or show, and often engaging in nonlinear and disjointed ideas. It made me wonder what the landscape will be like in, say, 20 years. And I just found this as a potentially interesting thing to talk about, Matt. Really. So
you've been wrong about me all these years. That's my point.
Well, I don't want to go that far, but, broken clocks twice a day, that sort of thing.
Nowadays, if a broken clock won't show any time, it'll be a dead screen.
That's true. That's true. All right. Did we forget anything? No?
Thank you to our guest. You were marvelous. We'd love to have you back. You could be a regular panelist.
Yeah.
We're all fans.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
You're welcome back anytime.
Oh, I would absolutely love to. It's been a blast.
Yeah. In case you missed it, the multiple times I mentioned it, the book is All the White Spaces by Wilkes. And if you're in the United States and you're watching this on the 27th, you only have to wait 2 days. And you know what? Do pre-order. It means so much to authors and publishers. Instead of waiting on the day, you might be thinking to yourself, I'm definitely going to get this book. But pre-ordering really, really helps. So just bear that in mind. So, because we want Allie to write another book. We want this book to be successful and for her to write more books. So,
thank you.
So anyway, Allie, sincerely, thank you for being on the show tonight. And guys, thanks for being here with me. Bridget, great list. of scary scenes. So I did agree with some of those. So
Well, I can't take all the credit. It's Rotten Tomatoes, but
yeah, there you go. Thank you to Rick and to Bridget and Bill for wearing a Lovecraft eZine t-shirt. Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am. And you can't really see mine, but I'm definitely wearing it. LovecraftEzineSwag.com. Get a coffee cup with it on there if you don't want to wear a t-shirt. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you next week. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Allie. Have a good night. Bye.